I can't hear anything.
Yeah, I can't hear anything either, Dave.
But it looks like they're moving on.
Let me see if I message in the chat.
Can you not hear us, Dave?
No, I can hear you now, but I can't hear. You moved to the second screen. I didn't hear anything.
Okay, so you didn't hear my introductory comments a moment ago.
No, I did not.
All right, so we'll back up and we'll do it again.
Sorry about that. I don't know what.
No, we're good. We're all learning. So we'll try again. This is Doug Bowman in Kansas welcoming you to Coalition Building 101. This webinar is the first in a series to be offered over the next few months. It's being brought to you by a partnership between 3 oral health state coalitions, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Kansas. Once again, my name is Doug Bowman. I'm here with Oral Health Kansas. My role, along with my colleagues, Brittany Krusel from Wisconsin, Cheryl Thompson-Marsh from Michigan, our role is to encourage and support the development of community oral health coalitions. Our grant is overseen by Patty Ulrich of the Michigan Coalition. Our special thanks go to DentaQuest Foundation for underwriting our work, which includes this seminar. So now, you should see on your screen a panel that allows you to communicate with us. First thing I'll tell you is that there are a list of 2 handouts. We encourage you to download these handouts. By following along with the Coalition Capacity Building Workbook, you'll have concrete examples of resources and tools as they're discussed. The other handout is the PowerPoint presentation itself, in a format that would allow you to take notes if you so choose. We welcome questions and we'll incorporate answers during the webinar in some cases. In other cases, we'll hold them till the end. So now it is my pleasure to introduce Renee Laux, the CADCA Training Operations Support Manager. Renee, take it away.
Thank you, Doug. And hi, everyone. As Doug said, I'm the Training Operations Support Manager at CADCA. And for those of you who don't know about CADCA, CADCA stands for Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. We are a national nonprofit member-based organization located in Alexandria, Virginia, and we were founded in 1992 as a result of President Bush's Drug Advisory Council. The mission of CADCA is to strengthen the capacity of community coalitions to create and maintain safe and healthy and drug-free communities globally. And while we are focused on preventing substance abuse and not oral health, I think you'll find in this training that coalition building is the same, regardless of the focus of the coalition. And Dave Chevelle, who will be your trainer, is going to provide you with some useful tools that you can use as you think about your own coalitions. You want to go to the next slide? And in case you wanted to see what your trainer Dave and I look like, here are our glamour shots. As the Training Operations Support Manager, I work with our trainers to provide coalitions with customized training based on their specific needs. So feel free to reach out to me if you need a customized training. My contact information is in your workbook. That's part of the handouts. And Dave Chevelle, who will be doing the bulk of the training today, is one of our master trainers and has a wealth of experience in coalition building and specializes in strategic planning, assessment, prevention program planning, implementation, and evaluation, promoting youth involvement, and community and state capacity building. So I think you'll get a wealth of knowledge from Dave today, and it's now my pleasure to turn it over to Dave Chevelle. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you, Doug, and thank you to the whole team, to Marcia and Tanya, and also thank you to DentaQuest for supporting this presentation. And again, this is Dave Chevelle, and I am a trainer with CADCA, and I actually live in Portland, Oregon, so I'm on the West Coast today. And it's been a pleasure working with the team in developing this presentation. And I'm just going to take a second to I lost the screen, so I just want to make sure that I'm not doing something. Yeah, if you could put back the screen, and I'll just tell you when to go ahead, and Tanya, when to go ahead and move the screens forward. So if we could move to the next slide, please, the objective slide. Great, thank you. So the team has put together this presentation as one of a series of 3, and it's we're very excited that they chose to work with CADCA, the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, because we're able to provide support for over 5,000 coalitions across the country. And what's exciting is in our work with coalitions, we actually provide a 3-week academy, so 3 one-week sessions over the course of a week. We have a lot of experience working with coalitions. We recognize that each coalition is different, each community is different, and there's no one way to develop a coalition. It depends on the nature of the community, the nature of the organizations, who's involved with the coalition. So our goals today are to provide some insight for how you can build and enhance the coalitions that you presently have, how you can build strong coalitions, and to provide some tools. So depending on where your coalition is at, to provide some tools that will enable you to strengthen your coalition and build a stable coalition, a coalition that will exist long enough to achieve the goals that we want to achieve. And so we've got a lot of material in this training. You'll notice that those of you that have been able to download the material, I think we've got 63 slides. We've got a lot of material to cover. We pulled the material from our Coalition Academy. And so we don't expect you to, by the end of the session, to be able to or want to do everything that we talk about. We provide a checklist at the end in the downloadable workbook. There is a checklist. And so the goal is to be able to provide you with some tools and ideas that you can go back to your coalitions and then say, what do we need to do to build our capacity, to build a strong coalition that we can use to do this work. And so if you haven't already, we encourage you to click on the handout section. There are the 2 handouts that Doug mentioned. The workbook is in Word format, so you can customize those tools to be able to work with your communities. And so we also encourage you to write questions in the chat box, because if we can't answer the questions here, we will provide a follow-up set of questions. So go to the next slide, please. So what we've done here, if you notice, I provided the objectives from each of the 3 states involved here. From Michigan, move to Kansas, please. From Kansas and Wisconsin. And the reason we provided these is to recognize that each of the states have a set of goals and objectives, all with the anticipation of increasing oral health, but each state has its unique objectives based on the characteristics of the state. And the same holds for communities. We recognize that each community is different, and while we all have the same common objectives, the way that we're going to achieve them in our communities will be different. And that's the value of having coalitions, why we're so excited to be working with coalitions, to be working with you, because coalitions can develop strategies that reflect the unique characteristics, culture, and diversity of each community. And so it's not a top-down approach, some guidance and support from the states and from the federal government, but it's really about communities making a difference in the communities. If you move to the next slide, please. And so the value of coalitions can, given that they're made up of community members of organizations from within the community, they're in a unique position to achieve these goals that we see on the screen here, to promote services and make sure that services are provided to everybody, to address disparities that may exist in your communities, to make sure that everybody has access to resources, and that includes addressing policies at the community level, maybe at the county level, maybe at the city level, regional level, and ensure that the strategies that we put in place reflect the different stakeholders in the community, the different target audiences that we're working at. And so we all know that coalitions are a wonderful way of really reflecting what's going on in the community. If we move to the next slide, please. So if we just start with what is a coalition, and these next few slides provide an overview of what coalitions are and what coalitions do. And a lot of you may know this, may think, I already know this. The value of this is to start to think about, as we recruit new people to join the coalition, to become involved with our work, they may not have the same understanding of what a coalition is. So these next few slides are as much about to provide clarity here, but to provide you with some tools for when you have conversations with potential members, with stakeholders, you can help explain in language that's appropriate to your community, what is a coalition. So what CADCA's definition is, I'll read this, but a voluntary formal agreement between groups and sectors in a community in which each group retained its identity but all agree to work toward a common goal. And so the key points here is that it is groups coming together, it is people coming together, and we work toward a common goal of the coalition, but it's really composed of individual organizations who will do the work of the coalition. The coalition is made up of members and stakeholders from the community, and they do represent organizations that will be involved in actually doing the work of the coalition as we work toward achieving a common goal. We go to the next slide, please. And so it's important to think about what are the different types of coalitions. This is important because some people may have had experience with coalitions and may not fully understand what are these coalitions that we're working together to provide and build oral health within the community. So for example, some people may have been involved with the activity or event-focused coalitions. They're putting on a health fair at a local school. They're putting on a particular town hall meeting around, again, in our case, we look at communities putting on around substance abuse, around oral health, around any issues, but typically focused on one event or activity. Another type of coalition is a service delivery, where you're actually providing some sort of service, whether it's providing education or curriculum in the classroom, you're providing dental services, or you're providing a specific service to a population. You're focused primarily on providing that service. Another type of coalition may be a community mobilization, where it's working together to pass a certain initiative, to do one particular policy, put it in place that requires a vote by the city council, the county council. And in our field, in the drug abuse field, we saw this, and a lot of you have experienced this, in moving towards smoke-free communities and smoke-free restaurants and bars within your community. Some coalitions focus on, tobacco coalitions focus on just those types of initiatives. And when you think about the type of work that we all are doing as oral health coalitions, we're really doing all of this. We're putting on events, putting on activities, we're providing services, providing curriculums and education, we're mobilizing around specific topics, whether it's enhancing the fluoride in the water, whatever it is, we're really looking at oral health from a comprehensive approach. So we're really a comprehensive coalition. And so people, this helps to, as we recruit new people, let them understand that we're doing a lot of everything. And so there's a lot of different ways that they can get involved in the coalition. And so if we go to the next slide, which then allows us to identify what do actually coalitions actually do. I believe slide 12 is what is the role of an oral health coalition. And so we're going to walk through in these 6 elements. And it's important that, again, as we're recruiting people to go through, to join our coalitions, they may have questions about each of these elements. And so it's important for us to be able to describe what is it that our coalition does and how our coalitions operate. And we're talking about building capacity. We're talking about building capacity to do these things. And you'll see, to be able to do our planning effort guided by a planning framework, implement strategies, engage sectors. We do that work and build capacity in order to do these things. So if we go to the next slide, please. Looking firstly at what are coalitions, we're impacting a specific community. And it's important to
should stop.
I don't know if people can hear that. Okay. I don't know. don't know what to do about this. I'm hearing a noise. Okay, it went away. Okay. So we're back to slide 13. I don't know what that was. That was emphasizing the point of impacting a defined community, I guess. So really, part of it is we need to know what community we're addressing. That allows us to identify which groups we're going to be engaging, what stakeholders, if we're a county, if we're a city, if we're a region, if we're a neighborhood. So when we're able to do that, we're able to define who's involved in the effort. It also lets us know what is the environment and the particular characteristics of the populations of the community. If it's a rural community where there's a lot of distances between people and a lot of transportation issues, that's different than maybe an urban community where we have different issues. So it's very important to identify the community we're serving, and that allows us also to identify communities within the communities or the diversity of populations within our community. So once we've identified a specific community that we're serving, then we can organize within that community. Allow us to go to the next slide, which describes the public health approach and the approach that we use to address particular problems. And public health approach, I'm sure all of you are aware of it, is composed of the agent, the host, and the environment. The agent, in this case, being oral health problems and oral health disease, whether it's tooth decay, tooth loss, gum disease, oral cancers. That's the agent. And so what we have a host, and that's individuals, whether it's young people, whether it's school-age children, adults, elderly. It's what our goal is. They're exposed to these different oral health conditions, and so one of our sets of strategies are individual-focused strategies that really provide individuals with information, provide individuals with tools to be able to take care of their own oral health. We recognize, though, that they live in a community environment that may either promote taking care of their mental health or make it more difficult for them to take care of their own mental health. So we can, their own oral health. So we look at the environment and to say, what are some of the things that we can do to provide access to oral health facilities, to establish resource centers, expand community water fluoridation, provide school programs, and provide screening and assessment. So really, the role of a coalition is to look at both the individual interactions and the individuals and how we can provide support for individuals, but also the systems and facilities and resources that support individuals getting access to the appropriate health care. And that's the role of a coalition. There may be individual organizations providing information, individual organizations providing dental care, but it's up to the coalition to look at it on a community-wide perspective for the community that we just defined. And so that's really what prevention is about and what the role of coalitions are. And that's important in describing to prospective new members and stakeholders why we need a coalition. Move to the next slide, please. Another aspect of doing coalition work is to use a planning process or planning framework which allows us to assess our community, to build capacity. Based on that assessment, do planning where we can identify priorities and identify resources that we can bring to bear, and implementing strategies, evaluating whether we're making a difference, and doing this in a way that sustains our effort and is understanding of different cultural differences and does it with cultural competence. What we've provided here is from the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. They've coined the phrase the Strategic Prevention Framework. It's really just a planning framework, and whatever framework a coalition is using, it's important to have this framework because it guides our work, it guides how we can get people involved in our efforts. Again, when we're recruiting people, some people may want to become involved in the assessment section. Some people may want to involved in doing some of the resource assessment, understanding what are the strengths of our community, what are challenges that our community faces. Others may say, no, I'm more interested in doing implementation. I want to get more involved in some of the strategies of providing information and working to change our community systems. So it's important to, again, have a plan for how we're going to do this work, but also provide that plan to people so they can identify what's the best way for them to get involved in the effort. And just an aside, this first webinar is based on building capacity to do the work of the coalition. The subsequent webinars will talk about different aspects of the assessment, planning, and implementation and evaluation. So if we're moving on to the next slide, the next element, and this is just a summary, it's kind of a busy slide talking about strategic planning. I think if you go the other way, is when we're describing what coalitions do, is we're involved in a strategic planning effort. And again, this is similar to what the strategic prevention framework shows it in a different format. But if we do a community assessment, we develop a logic model or a roadmap based on that community assessment, which allows us to target and prioritize comprehensive strategies that'll allow us to meet our goals around oral health, which will obviously result in improved oral health outcomes. So it's important to, as we recruit individuals and organizations, that let them see that, one, I'm from Oregon, so I can say this, that we've got our ducks in a row. We know what we're doing. Also provides them an opportunity to determine how they want to get involved in the effort. And so, if you move to the next slide, please. As we engage people, it's important to think comprehensively about the work that we're doing and comprehensively about who we're engaging in this effort. So the next slide, where we talk about engaging community sectors, you can see on this sector wheel is there are many different sectors that have a stake either as recipients of oral health services or as providers or as community members have a stake in achieving the outcomes of improved oral health. And so you can look at different sectors, and as we recruit people to do the work, it's important to start thinking what's the best area or the best sector from which we can recruit people, depending on the work that we're doing. And we'll talk more about this in a bit when we start talking about targeted recruiting and getting the right person. We talk about getting the right person to the right meeting at the right time. So if you move to the next slide, please, when we talk about engaging sectors, it's really about engaging stakeholders and volunteers to make sure we have enough people to get our feet on the ground, meaning we have enough people who are going to do the work. It's not just relying on one agency or one organization staff. And if we're going to be talking about coordination of services, of resources, we require different sectors to be involved with that. And finally, engaging sectors means that the community, again, the stakeholders as well as clients of our services have a role in determining what we're doing and a role in the strategies that we put in place. So it's important to have a well-rounded, comprehensive set of sectors involved in the work that we're doing. And as we talked about, when I talked about the public health approach, the work that we're doing is involved developing and implementing comprehensive strategies. Is the next slide, 19, which allows us to look at both individual strategies and strategies that impact individuals in the individual environment, and then strategies that target the shared environment. So as you can see here, just a summary, is we typically provide services and resources through individual organizations, healthcare providers, through our schools, and that's how we provide the education. Obviously, the dentists provide those sorts of services, the healthcare, to individuals. We also recognize that if we're going to change systems, we're going to look at the overall resources and the resource distribution within our communities. Then we're looking at the norms and regulations and policies and systems, and those are environmental strategies. So again, this is when people ask, well, what do the coalitions do? We look at our strategies comprehensively based on our community assessments, and so we want to look at individual strategies. If you move to the next slide, 20, please. And these are just some examples of the types of strategies that we put in place based on our assessments. And so it's important for people to recognize that there's a lot of work that we as a coalition do, and the coalition isn't doing these. The coalition makes sure that our partners are able to have the resources to be able to
I would get on and say, you did.
getting that feedback. And so, okay, it just went away. So we want to make sure that our partners have a clear picture of the type of strategies we're putting in place and community members. And then the environmental strategies, moving on to slide 21, we want to make sure that we're able to impact the systems and the policies that impact overall health of the community. So you can see here the range of strategies.
Can Comcast both the computer and phone? Yeah.
I don't know if this means okay, I'm getting that feedback again. Okay. So again, the whole point of this section is to be able to say, as we're recruiting people, as we're describing the role of a coalition, these are the types of strategies that we're putting into place, individual and environmental strategies. All with the goal, move to the next slide please, of achieving positive outcomes. And so this is important to be able to, as we're, again, recruiting people, as we're sharing the work that we're doing as a coalition, we need to be clear on what it is we're going to, our ultimate goal is what we're going to accomplish. So we need to have the ability to describe each of these in a way that's meaningful to our community. And so what we just talked about is, what do coalitions do? What are the ways that they do it? And that's important in providing that big picture to folks so that as we're recruiting them to join our efforts, whether it's an individual or an organization, they have a clear picture of what our coalitions do. And sometimes it comes up, people will ask the question, what's the difference between a coalition and a program? And so if you move to the next slide, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but if you take a look at it, is we need to be able to clearly define that programs typically are targeted, whether it's a curriculum or a particular service that we're providing, are provided to a specific population by a specific provider. And so it tends to have a limited focus, not necessarily minimal, but a limited focus on providing that particular service or information. Whereas a coalition is looking at the overall broad community and looking at how we can look at multiple aspects of the community and put together multiple programs and services and strategies in a comprehensive way to change the entire population. Where programs may be targeted toward individuals, coalitions tend to be looking at, as we mentioned, the entire community. We have the next slide. Another question some folks may ask is the difference between a coalition and a nonprofit. And while some coalitions may be nonprofits themselves, typically nonprofits are targeted similarly to a program, but providing a services or a range of services to a specific population over a given geographic area. And so they have their own unique vision and mission and ways that they try to achieve those, whereas coalitions are composed of many different agencies, many different organizations and individuals looking at typically a broader, as in our case, overall oral health within the community, and members represent the broader community, and they implement a broad selection of strategies. And coalitions, depending on their nature, may have funding, others may not, they may be all volunteer in nature. So that's just some of the differences between a nonprofit and a coalition, and that may be helpful to you as people ask as you're recruiting people to join your coalition. So just moving in this first section, in summary, just trying to summarize what all health coalitions do, they really are able to look at the, if we move on to slide 25, please, they're really able to look at the overall benefits of how we can engage multiple community sectors, multiple community organizations in a systematic, thoughtful planning process, implementing environmental and individual strategies to achieve a broad range of goals. You can see here the benefits of people working together in a community to try to achieve common goals around, in this case, oral health. So that's a lot summarizing what is a coalition. Hopefully it's helpful for you to then, as you talk to members of your community, take this and putting it in your own words, but share what is unique about a coalition, why it's beneficial to join this coalition effort. And I'll take a second here Was there any questions? I've been trying to monitor the chat box. Any questions that have come up regarding this first section? Or anybody on our panel want to add anything to what I've been saying? Okay. If not, I'll move on to the next section of our training, which is really about how we build our coalition's capacity to do the work. This is on slide 26. And really, it goes back to, we're building the capacity of our coalition to do the work. And again, this is the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration depiction of a planning process. And we're building the capacity to do our assessments so we understand our community's challenges and resources, planning, implementation, and evaluation. So if you move to the next slide, please. In order to do the work, when you look at the characteristics of a successful coalition and what it takes to build that capacity, we're looking at building a vision and mission so everybody has a clear picture of where we're headed, having leadership in place that's active leadership and leadership that's able to mentor coalition members and model doing the work. We have an active membership. We're organized in a way that we can efficiently do the work, and we do the work in a way that we're being culturally competent in doing that work. So we're going to spend the rest of the webinar going over each of these elements of again, building coalition capacity to do the work. And if you notice, if you can see, there's a capacity primer. A lot of the information here is based on CADCA's primer, and we encourage you to go out at the end of the webinar. You'll see the CADCA website, which is www.cadca.org. On that website, they have a whole list of tools. One of the tools is this primer, and so we encourage you to look at that, which will reinforce everything that I'm talking about today. So the key point when we start to talk about building coalition capacity and building the membership, leadership, organization, cultural competence, move to the next slide. We like to frame that conversation by saying we build coalition capacity in a way that form follows function. What this means is we build capacity to do the work that we're doing at this time. And so what this means, if we're involved in doing an assessment, we build capacity to do the assessment. So we may have a certain type of organization or individual on our coalition or active on our coalition in some of our work groups or committees that are involved in doing that assessment work. As we move from assessment to planning, as we move to assessment to planning, then the nature of the coalition may change and the makeup of the coalition may change. And so the coalition can look different. As our coalition progresses and grows, then we will need different capacity. As it matures and we start to build, we decide to become a more substantial organization, then the organization itself and the infrastructure can change. The whole point is that as we grow, the coalition can grow. It's not a static organization that looks the same throughout its entire lifespan, if you will. And so, given that, what we want to just talk about the first element of a successful coalition, and that involves, moving on to slide 29, engaging a core group of committed leaders. And so here for coalitions, whether you're just starting out, typically start with an idea or the goals, dreams of a few people. And it's important that that leadership, in whatever form it takes, stays involved with the coalition. Because the leadership, again, whether it's as the coalition involves a steering committee or a leadership team or an advisory board, they really set the tone for the coalition. They're the ones who model doing the work. We can't rely, if we have paid staff or we have a lead organization, fiscal agent, it can't be all that organization's efforts. It's got to be the community efforts. And so this core group of committed leaders are the ones that are modeling, saying, hey, I'm volunteering my time. Others can volunteer their times as well. They're the ones that make connections within the community. They're the ones that when it comes time to obtaining resources, whether it's funding or other types of resources, they're the ones that help to make the connections to obtain those resources. It's important to have a set of coalition leaders that have either are composed of community leaders or also have access to community leaders who can help to bring about some of the change that we're identifying based on our assessment and our strategies. So the first element is to have a core group of committed leaders. What they will do, one of the first things that they help the coalition do and the community do is to develop a vision and a mission. And so the vision, if you move to slide 30, please, the vision is important because this is what unifies us. This is our picture. It's based on our assessment being, here's what we have now. Vision says, what do we want our coalition to look like into the future? Some people do a 5-year vision, a 10-year, a 20-year vision, but it's what do we want to look like. An example, our vision of impact is to engage partners across the state, promote optimal oral health for all. That's what we want to look like in the future, what we want to be. And it's important that the leaders develop this vision with the input from coalition members, from community members. The mission is important. While the vision talks about what we want the community to look like or this operation to look like, the mission says how we're going to go about doing that, to describe the organization's role in making the vision a reality. And it's based on how we go about doing our problem-solving efforts and how we go about engaging the community. So on slide 31, it provides an example of the coalition consisting of diverse public and private partnerships works to create meaningful change to improve oral health and access to care in our community. So when we look at this, it's really about verbs. We work to create meaningful change, and we consist of different partners. So it describes what we are going to do to achieve our vision. And there are efficient ways to do this. We're obviously not going to cover how to develop these. But it's important for, as I mentioned, for the coalition leaders to engage stakeholders in developing a vision and mission, because this is what guides our effort, and especially when it comes to recruiting people. This is what we like to call our elevator speech. The vision and mission provide a really nice tool to be able to say, here's what we want to achieve, here's how we're going to go about doing it. So we have key elements being strong leadership, strong vision and mission. The next part of building a strong coalition is clarifying roles on a coalition. So we're just going to walk through on slide 32, provides some examples of different roles that people can play on the coalition. And it's important to, as we start to recruit people and engage people, to give them an opportunity to get involved in different ways and provide options for people to choose. I'm real busy right now. We've got a campaign of our own going on. I can't get involved as a leader, but I want to get involved in one of the work groups or on as just a coalition member. So we're just going to walk through each of these so you have a clear picture of what it takes to build the different elements of a strong coalition. So if we move to the next slide, I've been talking about coalition leadership. And as coalitions evolve, the coalition leadership can formalize, and the coalitions grow and become big and get involved and even obtain more resources, whether it's funding. Coalition leadership can evolve into a steering committee, a board of directors. The goal of the leadership, though, is to do these things, is to ensure that leadership ensures that the coalition is operating effectively, that there's communication between the different elements of the coalition, and to provide outreach outside the coalition to stakeholders within the community, whether it's community leaders, grassroots people, different sectors within the community. And so the leadership play a very valid role in their coalition. And in our experience with coalitions, this leadership role can evolve and, as I've talked about, become more formal. Some coalitions operate very effectively with an informal leadership team that meets prior to their coalition meetings, and they set the agenda for the meeting. They identify and prioritize what we'll be talking about at the meeting. It may not be a formal group. There may not even be a chairperson, but it's a group that says, here's what we're going to do to plan and guide the work of the coalition. Other coalitions have more formal leadership teams where they do have a steering committee with a chairperson, a vice chair, secretary, treasurer, that operate on a more formal basis. And so that can evolve as a coalition grows and becomes more formal itself. Another role on the coalition, if we move to the next one, and this is being coalition volunteers or coalition membership. And so here's where we're recruiting people to get involved with the work of the coalition. And members, you can see here, they get involved in the work of the coalition to become publicly involved, saying, I'm willing to support the efforts, I agree to the vision and mission of this coalition, and they engage others in doing the work of the coalition. And the third bullet point down, seek change within their own sphere of influence, whether they're a sector rep or they're a community member from the community, from one of the neighborhoods in the community or one of the diverse populations within the community. They're spokespeople, they're doing the outreach to their different community within the community. And one of the things that we say when we like to talk about recruiting members, being a member of a coalition is not a life sentence, meaning you don't have to attend every meeting all the time. It's getting the right coalition member to the right meeting at the right time. So we'll talk more about targeted recruiting. But again, here's where if we're going to be involved in doing assessment, we may have a list of 100 people who are on our coalition. Who are the 10, 15 that we want to get involved in doing the assessment as we move into developing strategies? Who are the 10, 15, 20 that we want to get involved in doing these strategies? So being a coalition member means we have your name. It means getting the right person at the right meeting at the right time. Another way of looking, if you move to slide 35, another way of looking at coalition membership are community stakeholders. And these are people who play roles in promoting oral health within the community, promoting cooperation and collaboration within the community, promoting economic health within the community. And these are the consumers of healthcare, of mental health care. And some of these folks, they may not know they're on the coalition or they may not be a member of a coalition now. These are all people that our coalition can reach out to as we're doing the work of a coalition. So we like to say that everybody's a member of a coalition, they just may not know it yet. And so as we're doing work, we can reach out to get the right people involved at the right time. And then finally, the last aspect that we just want to talk about is called the role of coalition staff. And by coalition staff, it's on slide 36. Sometimes when we work with coalitions that sometimes they operate with all volunteers, they operate very effectively, then we find that they may write for a grant, they get funding, and they're able to hire a staff. And we find that at that point, coalition members say, okay, we have staff's going to do the work. We found that does not work for coalitions because there's too much work for one person to do if they are staff. So the staff may be paid by a grant, it may be a host organization providing staff support. So really what we like to say is staff should support coalition members in doing the work, and engaging and making sure that people on the committees doing the work of the coalition have the resources they need to get the work done. Staff should not feel responsible for doing all the work. They should be able to engage the leaders and engage other coalition members to be able to recruit others to do the work. So staff play an important role in supporting, not doing everything. And so that again, may or may not be relevant to everybody on the call here because some of you may or may not have staff, but as we move down the road, it's important to be clear about what is the role of staff in this coalition. And so if we're moving on to the next slide, what we provided just in the workbook provided some sample job descriptions. And again, you may not have all of these positions, but as your coalition progresses, we encourage you to take these. They're all in Word format, modify them to make it work for your coalition. One of the things that's very clear, especially when we're working with volunteers, when you look at each of these job descriptions, is I believe all of them have some sort of clear description of what is the commitment. So if we're asking someone to be on the steering committee or a subcommittee chair, we need to be real clear and fair. What is it we're asking for? This entails 1 meeting a month, 2 meetings a month, 3 to 4 hours of a month of work. And sometimes if we're recruiting to a specific subcommittee and we develop a description for that subcommittee, this subcommittee is going to be meeting for the next 3 months. Our goal is to complete the assessment. We're going to meet for 1 meeting each month. Let's be really clear what we're asking people to do that manages expectations, and it's also fair to the person so they know what they're getting involved in. Also, just one other thing about job descriptions, and it relates to recruiting, is job descriptions should also describe what is the benefit if the person does join a subcommittee or join as secretary or treasurer. What's the benefits to them? How will they benefit from being involved in doing this work? So if we talk about how we're going to recruit people to do this work, here's where we can start talking about recruiting members. So moving on to slide 38, what we're recruiting people is to do the work. What this means is when I first started out in doing coalition work, we just to put up flyers all over town and say, come to our coalition meeting, join our coalition. And then people would come to the coalition meetings, who knows who would come, and hopefully they would be interested in the work that we're doing. Hopefully we would be able to provide something that was meaningful to them. Well, while we still want to do this blanket, or some people call it shotgun approach to recruiting, what CADCA talks a lot about is doing targeted recruiting. So recruiting people to do the work of the coalition that we're involved with now. So as we're doing and developing our recruiting plans, we want to be able to say, what work do we need? What are we doing now? Are we implementing specific strategies? Are we going to be doing policy work? Are we going to be doing assessment? Are we doing planning? Let's recruit people that want to be involved in these things. So given the work we're doing, what sectors or organizations may we need to be involved? What resources we need? If we're going to be doing a lot of outreach, we're going to be needing resources, people with skills, be able to provide training, be able to do public speaking. We're going to be holding meetings, venues for those meetings. So what resources do we need? Once we identify the work, the sectors, the resources, then we can start to say, okay, who do we need to recruit? And so that's the thought behind our concept of targeted recruiting. And again, the next slide, 39, is just reinforcing what I talked about. We recruit people to that have the potential to play a role on the coalition. One of the things we found is that people stay involved with coalitions when they have an active role. Sometimes coalitions do a survey of their members and they say, you know, why do you stay with the coalition? And some people say, oh, I come because you provide good sandwiches at your coalition meeting. And so we like to say the role of the coalition member is not eating our chicken sandwiches. The role of the coalition member is getting involved at some point in doing work that's meaningful to you. And so as we've identified the work that we need to do, then we can start to look at, okay, what sectors are going to be involved in doing the work, which allows us to move to slide 40. And so when we look at the different sectors, it also, if you just move to slide 41, what we provided in the toolkit is a sector worksheet. And this provides a list of a whole range of different sectors. And so the point here is that as we've identified the work we're doing, then we can start to get and say who needs to be involved and which sector needs to be involved in this work. If we're going to be doing a lot of outreach to the neighborhoods and to different diverse cultures within our community, then we can look at those different sectors, the human service providers. If we're going to be reaching out to pregnant women to make sure that they have access and they are well informed about oral health, then we can look at which sectors maybe have access to that population. So it's really important to be able to identify what sectors we need to be involved. So here's a tool that allows you to say what sectors do we currently have involved, who from those sectors is involved, what additional sectors might we need. This is one tool. Another tool is to be able to help us to identify what resources we need. So if we move to slide 42, we can start to identify what are specific skills, knowledges, resources, and what do we currently have with our members of our coalition, and then what skills do we need. And again, this is all driven by the type of work we're doing. If we're going to be doing web-based information sharing, so we're going to be using social media and websites to share information, then we need people who are knowledgeable of websites, have access to different websites, have skills in working with Twitter or whatever social media we're using. And so we want to be able to identify what are those resources. And so on slide 43, you'll see, and in the workbook, you'll see a tool that allows us to identify what resources we have and what resources we need to do the work at this point in time. So once we've identified what work we need, we've looked at different sectors, different parts of our community. We've looked at what resources we need. We've looked at our, and I haven't mentioned it, but we also want to go back to our community map, our definition of the community. Are we addressing the different geographic areas of our community? Then what we can do is start to say, okay, let's recruit individuals and organizations to do the work. Well, slide 44 is where we start talking about prioritizing individuals and organizations to be recruited. Given our work, given our analysis, who are the people we want to recruit? What this target recruiting does, instead of saying, putting out flyers and holding a meeting and hoping people come, it really allows us to say, okay, for this next work that we're doing, who are the 4, 5, or 10 people that we need, or organizations? Let's go make a targeted approach to those individuals and organizations. So this means we've identified, say we're going to do a public relations campaign, we want to work with businesses. So let's go to the Chamber of Commerce. We can identify, okay, who can the Chamber of Commerce can we talk to? What's the benefit for the Chamber of Commerce? You see here, identify their WIFM. WIFM is what's in it for me. What will be the benefit of any group, whether it's the Chamber or whomever, that is going to be involved in doing the work that we've identified. So on slide 45, we provided a nice little tool that allows us to, if you're following along in the workbook, the center column is where we start with what is the work that we need, what is the desired involvement, whether it's a role, a skills, or resources. On the left side is saying who are the individuals or organizations we want to recruit. Then we can say what's the benefit to that organization, and then who is going to be making the ask, who's going to be doing the invite. One of the other reasons why people stay involved with coalitions, besides having a role on the coalition, an active role, it's about relationships. People stay involved because they have a relationship with somebody. So here's where we're identifying which existing coalition members or stakeholders know somebody or know an individual or know somebody from an organization that they can go make that ask. That way, it's not someone just receiving an email or seeing a flyer up, here, come join the coalition. They're getting a personal ask on why they might want to become involved in the coalition and why they're needed or their organization is needed to do this particular work that we're engaged with. So if you move to the next slide, when we start recruiting specific individuals and organizations, we want to be able to be thoughtful about it and strategic about it. And so we recommend that we develop talking points. The next slider in the toolkit provides an example of some talking points. But who's the right person to go to that particular organization? If we're going to be talking to a group of dentists in town, who has that connection to that group of dentists? We want to be talking to the schools so we can start to get into their health classes. Who has access to the particular building? Who has access to the school district? So starting to really be thoughtful about how we're going to be making this approach to recruiting people to come do the work of the coalition. Describing their with them, how will they benefit from it, anticipate their objections, why might they say they're too busy, how will we respond to that, and provide options for their input. They may say, you know, I can't get involved right now at this point in time, but then you can say, okay, well, we have another committee that's going to be starting in 6 months dealing with this. That may be something. Or would you like to receive our newsletter or our emails? So we can make sure that if they are not able to engage as we would like them to, provide them with options for their involvement. So slide 47, it just provides, and this is in the toolkit, sample talking points for you to be able to engage somebody in a conversation about their potential role on a coalition. And then the next slide just talks about what are the key elements of sustaining coalition memberships. And so if you just, I think each time you click, it'll bring up the text. So the first thing we do, people stay involved with the, there we go, thank you. If people stay involved with the coalition, as I mentioned, if they have a clear role on the coalition and it's a role that's appropriate for them, they're able to engage immediately. So again, when we do recruit someone to our coalition, have an opportunity for them to get involved. If someone will say, I want to get involved, and a lot of coalitions unfortunately do this. They have a sign-up sheet, they have a community meeting, they have a sign-up sheet, people sign up, and then no one gets back to them for a month or 2 months or 3 months. Well, that doesn't motivate them to get involved with this coalition. We want to engage people as soon as we can, make sure that when we do have successes, even smaller successes, that people know that. People like to be involved in a successful effort. We want to make sure that their WIFM is fulfilled, meaning whatever benefits they want to get out of the coalition, we're fulfilling that, and we celebrate people's contributions. So coalitions need to celebrate individual contributions, organizational contributions, and overall contribution of the coalition itself. So to support this, we provided 2 tools for you. One of the tools is a coalition membership worksheet. What some coalitions do is, this is the next slide, 49. What some coalitions do, they provide this worksheet. Some do it on an annual basis or after someone signed up, but it allows the member, whether it's an individual organization, to describe why do they want to get involved with the coalition? What are some of their skills? What are some of the resources they have? What are some of their interests? How have they been involved with the coalition? So some coalitions do this as an annual member survey to just check in with their members to say, are we meeting? Why you're involved with the coalition? And it's a nice way of checking in with people. Another tool, to go to the next slide, please, is as we're recruiting people, is an orientation manual. And there's a lot in this particular manual, but the more people know what the coalition is doing, what work they're involved with, how they're organized, the more they're able to make an informed choice about why they would want to get involved with the coalition, and therefore they may be more likely to stay involved with the coalition. So it's an outline of a potential orientation manual that you can use to orient new members to the work of the coalition. So, right on schedule. That covers the second main portion of this particular webinar, talking about membership and recruiting and how we retain members of our coalition. And I'll just take a stop here. If there's been any questions or comments, or anybody on our panel want to add anything at this point? Okay, this allows us to move on to the third part of our webinar, is to really look at how we organize our coalition. And so this is slide 51. And this is one of the things here is when we talk about organization and infrastructure, there's a lot of different elements that go into it. And in some sense, we talk about tools for organizing infrastructure. You need them when you need them. So when coalitions first start out, they may not need bylaws. They may not need MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding, Memorandum of Agreement with different members, but you may need them as you move on, as you start to become more sophisticated, coalitions start to receive different funding and different engage with different fiscal agents, then you may need some of these tools. So I'm going to walk through an example of some tools that we have found helpful. And so just keep in mind that we don't have to have every one of these tools in place right now. We need these tools when we need them. So the first tool that I'd just like to share is the concept of it having an org chart. And an org chart of having some sort of organizational structure. The org chart itself is helpful, but the organizational structure is important. And so the organizational structure, moving on to slide 52, allows us to describe, okay, what are the different roles of our organization? We have a steering committee, we have a coalition itself, we have different work groups, we may have a fiscal agent, we may have staff. What are the different roles? And that describes who's going to do what. We're going to talk in a second about decision making. When we have different groups, different subcommittees on the coalition, they each play a different role, they each make different types of decisions. So we want to be able to clarify that, and it's important to talk about structure in terms of when we're meeting, how we communicate, who is able to make which sorts of decisions. So if you move to the next slide, this is an example of a coalition from one of our coalitions, but it clarifies what are the different roles, who is running the coalition. We can look at who's on the steering committee. Do we have a fiscal agent? Who's the fiscal agent? And importantly here is what are the different work groups? So you can see 4 different work groups here. And the key here is as we're recruiting people, we can this is a nice recruiting tool to say, how do you want to get involved? Do you want to be a member of a work group? Do you like to just come to our coalition meetings? Do you want to be on the steering committee? So it gives people an opportunity to see how they might want to get involved in the coalition. Which leads to the next slide, which is decision-making responsibilities. There are lots of different decisions and actions that are taken by a coalition, and so the organization chart, having a clear structure, identifies who's making these decisions. And so this page, it's also in the workbook, it may be a little bit difficult to read here. It talks about different types of decisions that coalitions made. When we talk about the content, this is the work that we're doing. So it's developing the vision, mission, our strategic planning. What are our priorities going to be? What are our strategies going to be? How we recruit different members. So who's doing each of these work? If we only have a coalition with no work groups and no leadership team, then all of this work needs to be done in our coalition meetings. So when we break out into different work groups and different committees, and we may have staff, then we start to decide who's going to be doing this work. In addition to the content, we want to be able to look at organizational decisions. Everything from, do we go for this particular grant? Do we partner with this organization? To recruiting different members. If we're going to be recruiting leaders from our community. So these are the types of things that are necessary to keep the organization going. And it's important to identify who is going to do these. If we have a staff or a lead agency, are they going to be doing it all, or we need to form a membership work group? Or a lot of times for bylaws, for example, when we're developing our bylaws, we may want to form a work group of 2 or 3 people that'll meet for 1 month, 2 times, to develop a draft set of bylaws. So it's again forming groups, committees to be able to do the work that we've identified. These are some of the types of decisions that can be made by some of these groups. And finally, the operational or day-to-day types of decisions. Everything from planning meetings, putting the meetings together, correspondence among, reporting if we have different funding schemes, etc. Who's going to be doing all this? So if we have a coalition composed of all volunteers, not one person's going to want to be doing this or one agency. So how do we share the wealth of this work across the different work groups? It's helpful to have a org chart that tells us where the work is being done in our coalition. So that's 2 elements of organizational structure, which is one is having a structure in place. The other is looking at our decisions, deciding who's going to be making those decisions, where will those decisions be made. A third important element of coalition infrastructure and capacity and organization is a timeline. It's on slide 55. And so what a timeline does, it provides a big picture to folks so that they can see what work the coalition is doing. A lot of times we may have action plans, we have strategic plans, but there's not one page that really lays out the work that we're going to be doing. And this is helpful, because, especially if we're recruiting people, they can see all the different ways they can get involved. If we're recruiting people that they may be busy right now, we can show them the timeline to be able to say, okay, well, in 3 months you're not so busy. What might some of the activities you want to get involved with at that time? It allows us to be able to allocate resources. If we have 12 different things going on in May, we can start to prioritize and say, okay, how are we going to get all this done? So it allows the leadership of the coalition members really to have the big picture of what is it all we're doing, how are we going to be getting it done, when are we going to be doing it, and who's doing it. So moving on to the next one, another aspect of building a strong coalition is having an action orientation. And not every coalition addresses this, and we do a lot of work, a lot of our technical assistance with coalitions is moving them to be more action-oriented. A lot of times people join coalitions thinking, oh, I can join an advisory board, which means I'm going to show up at a meeting once a month and I'll give my opinion and that's it. Well, for some, that may be all they can give. For some of our community leaders, that may be all they can give. But we still need to do work on the coalition. So a lot of what we try to stress with coalitions that we work with is your meetings go a long way. How you actually conduct your meetings go a long way toward building toward an action orientation. And so what we try to do is, even in the agenda that we send out prior to the meeting, when we send out an email, we're very clear about what action will be taken, what decisions will be made at this meeting. And even some coalitions, when they send out the email, in the first part, you know, when you open your email and you get to see a 2-3 inch space, in that section they say, these are the decisions we're making. This is why you need to be at this coalition meeting. So it's not just come to our meeting to eat our chicken sandwiches and hear what's going on. No, it's come to our meetings because we need you to help make these decisions, to help do this planning. And then subsequently after the meeting, when you send out the minutes of the meeting, it's not just saying, here's what happened. These are the decisions that were made. These are the actions that were decided upon. These are who's going to be involved in doing these actions. So it's really about setting a tone for, we're an action-oriented coalition. We don't just meet to meet. A nice tool along that line, to go to the next slide, please. And this is an example, and I'm a volunteer with the coalition here in Portland, Oregon. This is from our coalition. We're the Safe Neighborhood Advocacy Partnership. And this sample, it's a little bit hard to read here, is also in the workbook. But essentially what it has is, a lot of you may already be doing this, but for each item on the agenda, we set a time limit. And this is important because someone may come to the meeting because they want to talk about the third or fourth item on the agenda. If we spend all our meeting talking about the first two items, they're going to say, why did I come to the meeting? They didn't get to what I talked about. So it respects people for coming to the meeting. It's important, if you do set times, to have a timekeeper and have a process for saying, okay, we're at the end of our time on this topic. We're going to table it till next meeting. We're going to give it to this committee to do the work. And we have 5 minutes more. But to be real clear that we need to get to everything on our agenda, let's respect that. Let's set times. You'll notice the third column is who's going to be doing it. We have staff on our coalition. We made the commitment that staff will not be leading any coalition meetings. They may facilitate it. They may help to put together the agenda. But the coalition meeting will be run by coalition members. And so the coalition members, the role of staff is to make sure that the coalition members who are leading each section of the agenda have the tools, the information they need to do it. Staff can support them. But again, here's where leadership, here's where members are modeling that I'm going to be involved in this coalition, and so I'm involved in doing the work, and leading doing the work. And then the final column is the action or decision. We try to, and we're working on this, we try to make sure that every item on our agenda, we're actually making a decision or we're doing some actual planning. So it's not just reporting out. Sometimes that's necessary, although reporting out can be done on a handout or on an email, on our website. So when we have people together, they're there for a reason, and that's to make a decision. That's to do some planning. And so part of this, we always try to have a section for each item, but at least where we're engaging the members of our, whoever attended the meeting, in some sort of discussion. So we try to have small group discussions as much as we can. Not everybody wants to talk at the larger meeting. The small group discussion, you have a note taker. People are heard. People have a chance to voice. We get a variety of decisions. Those groups can report their feedback back to the larger group. It makes for a much more action-oriented meeting. People tend to stay involved with coalitions when they have a role, when they have relationships, and when they're action-oriented and they're actually doing something. That's just some thoughts on moving the coalition forward for being an action-oriented coalition. And so the last piece on building strong capacity, and this is something that we use throughout the entire process, is not just in capacity building, and that's cultural competence, which is on slide 58. And so there's a lot of different ways to talk about cultural competence. Here, this is a definition from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, of which the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration resides. The rather long, wordy description, but it covers what we would want. We recognize that each coalition, each group, each individual has their own different definition of cultural competence. But basically, the key points here are it's behaviors, attitudes, and policies, which means cultural competence is something we do. It's not just something you say. In the way your coalition operates, the way your organization operates is based on cultural competence. And it's coming together in a system among individuals, so that's our coalition. So we develop these behaviors, attitudes, and policies, and the work that we do to make sure that we can effectively engage diverse cultural populations within our community. And so it makes sure that when we do engage our community, our grassroots members, we engage different sectors, we engage different communities within the community, that we're able to do that effectively because we have these behaviors, attitudes, and policies in place. And so the first part of being culturally competent is to recognize that there are many different ways to define culture. Slide 59 just provides some examples of different definitions of culture. And the whole point within each of these circles, if you will, there's a whole range of diversity within each circle. So it's not just one or two ways of defining culture. And the whole point is, as we do our work as a coalition, we're going to be engaging people from each of these different cultures, each of these different types of diversity. We need to understand within any one of these cultures what are the unique characteristics of that culture. So, and that's important because, again, I'm just looking at education, people's different levels of education. We have people in our community that don't read. All our publications that we put out aren't going to be effective, so we need to understand that. One example from a community I work with is there was a school for the deaf in their community, and so they wanted to reach out to the deaf population within the community. And so they said, okay, at our meetings we'll have people providing sign language interpretation. But when they looked into it more deeper, the deaf school in the community, they used to teach lip reading, and so sign language was not important. So it's very important for us to understand each of the elements of culture and what makes them unique. And so in the CADCA, move to the next slide, please, in our cultural competence primer, we talk about fostering cultural competence as a process. And we don't just put a policy in place and we're all of a sudden culturally competent. Cultural competence means having knowledge, and starting with having knowledge and awareness of all the different cultures in the community and what are unique characteristics of each of those cultures and how we can be attentive to that culture and how we can be appreciative and sensitive to those unique characteristics. And so a lot of our efforts in all our coalition work is to, when we're defining our community and we're starting to reach out to those communities within the community, is to not just be culturally competent or trying to be knowledgeable and aware by inviting people to our meetings, but going out into the community, holding meetings within the community. A lot of coalitions, as they're working with different communities, will just have someone go down and have an advertiser at a coffee shop, if that's appropriate, or where we'll meet members of this community. And another example of this, and being knowledgeable of different communities, and just some people may not have had, think about, well, we'll hold our meetings at schools. Well, some people may not have had a good experience with education in their lives, so the last place they want to go to a school or maybe to a police station for a particular meeting. So it's important, again, to know our populations, and the best way to, and only way we can know them is by reaching out to those different elements of our population and becoming knowledgeable about that. When we become knowledgeable, if you move to the next slide, please, when we become knowledgeable is throughout the entire planning process, assessment, capacity building, planning, implementation, evaluation. There are specific ways we can apply that knowledge and awareness of different communities. Again, if we don't have a very literate community, then handing out a survey in the assessment phase is not going to be the best way to find out about different oral health practices. Or some people, they don't like to do surveys. So again, when they've done surveys in the past, it's been researchers coming into their community where they have them do a survey, they provide all this information, then the researchers leave. So we need to really understand what are the different cultural aspects and experiences people have had, and we need to be appropriate at each element of our planning process, whether it's assessment, capacity building, planning, implementation, or evaluation. This page is in the workbook, and the goal of it is to start thinking about just the different cultures and diversity and how we can be attentive to that and sensitive to that as we do our work. Another tool that's in your workbook, we turn to the next slide, please, page 62. It's looking at, we have a cultural competence checklist, and this checklist is if we're doing a specific initiative, whether it's an outreach or education campaign, is for any given culture within our community, it's asking questions that say, are we really being sensitive to that culture? So are materials appropriate for them? Have we done outreach appropriate for them? Have we engaged them in our planning process? So depending on, and so we encourage coalitions to do this for multiple cultures, specific cultures within their community. And because it really allows us to say, are we really reaching that culture? And do we really understand that culture enough to know whether to be able to answer these questions about whether we're going to be approaching them in an effective and in a sensitive way? So this checklist is helpful. So we're right on time, 20 after, and what we covered today is what is the role of a coalition. That's important as we move to the next slide, the next step slide, please. So we've talked about today what is the role of the coalitions. We have that big picture as we're recruiting people. What do coalitions do? We talked about leadership. We talked about recruiting membership. We talked about infrastructure and how we build a good organization, how we build cultural competence into our work. So we've covered quite a bit, and as I said at the very beginning, no one's expected to do all this at one time, so we've provided a coalition capacity building checklist. And this checklist allows you to be able to go through each of these elements and say, given where we're at, we talked about form follows function, meaning we need to build our coalition to do the work we're doing. What elements do we need to work on now? Maybe we need to work on our recruiting. Maybe we do a great job of recruiting. We just need to organize ourselves a little bit better. Or it's time for decision making. We need bylaws. So the checklist, this is on slide 64, allows us to start to make some of those decisions. What work do we need to do? Who can we start to engage in doing this? So hopefully for you, this is a nice tool that summarizes what we've talked about, but allows you to identify and prioritize what elements of capacity do we need to work on now, can we work on now, and then build our next steps off of that. And so we do want to offer you, to go to the next slide, please, and I'm sure there's a lot of technical assistance available from within your states, from your different organizations, but we just want to let you know that there is technical assistance available from CADCA, and this is available open to anybody in the country. You dial 1-800-54-CADCA extension 240. You'll meet a wonderful person, Jackie Rhodes, our technical assistance manager, and her sole job is to support coalitions in doing the work. So she has helped put together this work. If you say, David talked about recruiting, I didn't quite understand it, Jackie can provide another voice. Or you may say, I need an example of a bylaws for this type of organization. Jackie can help you provide some examples for that. If she can't answer your questions, she has access to a lot of people who can answer your questions. So we encourage you to follow up here and all our webinars with CADCA as one option for technical assistance. So with that, again, thank you all for staying involved with this, for staying on the line. And I'm seeing here we're building coalitions on a statewide basis. You remember leadership with the community and maybe an effective leadership role within the coalition at a more macro level. Yes, that's a question about state-level coalitions, and our experience with state-level coalitions it's important for them to have a leadership team. They typically have a steering committee that has made up of members of the representatives from each of the coalitions, and so that way they're getting the local community input. And then also they can create subcommittees based on specific tasks that are happening at the state level. So if there's a subcommittee that wants to promote specific legislation, or a subcommittee that wants to take on providing resources throughout the state, they can pull from the different coalition members to form that particular subcommittee. So if I'm understanding this right, yes, there is very appropriate to have different levels of involvement from coalition members. And again, this is another way of engaging your coalition members. Some coalition members may want to become involved at the state level, so they can become involved at the state level coalition. I hope that it answered the question. If not, someone can help me clarify.
Dave, this is Doug in Kansas, and I want to jump in here at the end to thank you for an outstanding presentation. It was very informative and very detailed and very helpful. We all appreciate your depth of knowledge of coalitions and your commitment to the important role that they play in supporting a vibrant community as we try to make the changes that we're trying to make in the world around us. We appreciate that very much. Renee, I also want to thank you for the outstanding coordination that you brought to the table in helping us launch this webinar. Thank you very much for that. Dave answered the question, one of the questions that showed up in our chat box. There was one other that popped up a little bit late, and the question was, is there a national oral health coalition? And the answer is yes. And they do try to coalesce each of the state oral health coalitions into a national oral health coalition, and a lot of that work takes place out of this office exactly right here in Kansas. We're kind of taking the lead and for the time being in organizing that. So if you have questions, feel free to contact us about that. To all of our listeners, I want to urge you to stay on the line for just a few more minutes. We are going to pose a very short 4-question survey about this webinar. Your responses will be very helpful to Dave and the entire Tri-State team and all of us as we design the second in our series of 3 webinars, and the topic will be strategic planning. It's scheduled for November 29th, the same time frame, noon to 1:30 Central Time. We'll have announcements that will be sent out in many of the same fashion to inform you as it comes up. And then I must, of course, once again thank DentaQuest Foundation for their ongoing support of the work that we're undertaking. Hearing nothing else, like I said, hang on the line for just a little bit and answer that real quick survey, please.
And I'll just say, this is Dave Chevelle again saying thank you all for your support in this, and I do look forward to working with you all over the next 2 webinars. So thank you.
Thank you, Dave. This is Doug. I just want to clarify something. The survey will come as a separate email directly to your email inbox as a separate transaction. So I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you. You have a good day as well. Thank you.